thank you so much, all of you, for coming. And I know the reason that you've come is that actually what we're going to talk about today is probably the most important thing we could possibly talk about, which is how we work together to actually meet the challenges of the climate crisis, but particularly the challenge of how do we inspire people to connect and engage and feel like it's part of their lives. I can't tell you how important it is that you're all here, because I'm looking at you thinking you guys can be the voice for us going forward. You can go out there and talk to people about how we could perhaps work more cleverly together to actually make an impact. I'm going to say something that I wasn't supposed to say, and Rowan's going to kill me because it's not on script. But this morning I was talking to somebody about 2030, but they were talking about the history of the rocket, the first train, George Stephenson's train. And I was thinking, if you imagine being at that time, all of those people like you, feeling like this is the start of a new generation. It's the start of a new thinking, really, really future-facing thinking. And I think it's just that thing that I'd like for you to keep with you, because actually you guys can look to the future. You can actually imagine a different future. So I should say, my name's Sarah Fisher. I have the privilege of being the director of this place. I'm also a director of Contemporary Visual Arts Network, as well as a number of other things. And part of what we're doing with the network and part of what we're doing with the gallery is we're trying to support people to think differently about what's happening with the environment, to use culture as a route to actually celebrate the things that we need to do of our times. If you think about it, those people that were surrounding the rocket, they were envisioning a different future. Feels to me, doesn't it, with what the government's doing in terms of the climate agenda, that perhaps all of us could do that and step in where they're not there? One of the reasons we're here is to launch We Feed the UK, which is a fantastic example of culture coming together with farmers, with the environmental agenda, looking at regenerative farming and actually engaging a much broader cross-section of the public. Why do we need to do that? Because frankly, I think politicians perhaps are not going to deliver and work towards their promises unless the public actually feel it's also urgent. So from my perspective, creativity is at the heart of where we can go with changing that narrative. Let's bring everybody on board. Let's work out how we can work together and outside of silos. Does anybody like silos? No, I don't think we do. So we are here to do that, really. And the title of it is Funding Creative Cross-Sector Collaboration that Breaks Down Barriers and rises to the urgency of the climate crisis. Put more simply, we need to think about imaginatively about how we bring everybody on board. So that's my feeling, is that if we can use imagination and we can reimagine a future, we can actually change the narrative. But I'm not going to tell you how to do that, because we have this wonderful panel here that are going to tell you how to do that, and people that are much more better placed to actually talk about this than myself. So I'm going to start off with Jane. And Jane has got so many fantastic things said about her that I need to actually read it off a thing. So Jane is... Growing Philanthropy Director, Environmental Funders Network, and it's a UK-based network of foundations, family offices and individual donors supporting environmental causes. The Environmental Funders Network co-hosts Arts for Life, which explores how funders and philanthropists can support the arts and culture to actually inspire action on climate change and the nature crisis, bring the two together and reimagine the world we live in. So basically she's doing what I've just said we all need to do. So if it's all right with the rest of the panel, I'll introduce everybody as we go along, and Jane's going to just talk to us for a few minutes about what she does, and I'm handing this the weird mic.
Is that okay? Can everybody hear that? Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for hosting us. It's lovely to be here. And thanks to Rowan and all the team at Gaia Foundation for putting this together. I'm really excited to be here, not only at this event and at the gallery, but it's the first time I've ever been to Liverpool. So I'm very excited. Yeah. So as Sarah said, I work for the Environmental Funders Network, and as our name, as you would imagine from our name, we are a network for individuals, foundations and family offices that support environmental causes. And our members are based in the UK. There are actually a number of similar networks to ours around the world, but our members fund in the UK and also internationally. I think our name is actually a bit of a misnomer because we actually welcome any funder with an interest in the environment. And now we absolutely know that the environment is connected to every other social cause. So whatever you fund, whatever you care about, the environment is at the root of that, and we need a healthy environment and a healthy climate in order to live and thrive. So we do welcome any funder that just wants to find out about what we're doing. So we have two aims: to grow environmental philanthropy, and I'll come on to that in a minute, and to make that funding as effective as it possibly can be. And we do that by bringing funders together with each other and with experts through meetings, events. We have an annual retreat, we do field visits, we carry out a lot of research, and we produce publications. And it's great that some of our members are actually here today, and some of our members have supported the We Feed the World, We Feed the UK campaign. So you might think that the problems that we're facing with the environment and climate are so enormous that funding, philanthropy, funding from foundations is not going to make a difference. It's not going to touch the sides or make any difference. But in actual fact, the complete opposite is true. It's exactly the kind of funding that is needed. There's no other source of funding like it. It can be used to take risks, fund long term. It can come into play very quickly, can provide unrestricted funding, and it can be used to test out different solutions that then other funding like government and corporate funding can come in and scale. So it is a vital tool as we try to move towards a more sustainable future. We've got tons of examples of really effective environmental funding, and some of them are in this publication here, Stories to Inspire. I don't want to be carrying these home, so please do take one with you. So given all of that, you might think that levels of funding for the environment are really high, but actually they're not. We track grants from UK foundations for environmental causes. We do that on a regular basis. And for years and years, the percentage of funding from all UK foundations going to environmental causes was 3%. Tracked that for years and years. The last time we did the analysis, which was the year ending 2018-19, it was at 6%, which is great, it's doubled. And we're doing the analysis again, and early indications are the growth has continued. We still don't think it's going to be above around 10%. So given that everything, literally everything, is dependent on the environment, even 10%, the growth is fantastic, but it's still a relatively low level of funding. We definitely need much more. So that's by way of background into what we do. But today I'm here really to talk about this program that we've been running for the last year called Arts for Life. So we often work at intersections of environment with other social causes. And we started this program in January 2023 with the Arts Funders Group, which is another group like ours, but a collection of arts funders. And it's a program to explore. It's mainly events, online and in person, and we've produced some resources as well, to explore how funders can support the arts, culture and entertainment sectors to engage the public, governments, companies, everybody, with the climate and environment crisis, and to help people reimagine the world that we want to live in. And I think that's really important, and I'm sure we'll discuss that more as a panel, this sort of positive imagining of our future. One thing we do want to do as part of this programme is set up a pooled fund, and we'd like an arts funder. We think a specialist arts funder would be the best placed person to host that fund. So if you have any ideas or are interested yourself, do let me know. And we started this Arts for Life programme because some of our members were funding this kind of work, could see how powerful it was, and could see that there was not enough funding going to this intersection. But the other reason is I think there's just a general acceptance now that the environmental sector, however you define that, has been using science and facts and information to try to engage people and get them to take action. And generally it's just not been working because the facts are frightening, and it means that often people just turn away from them. And the arts and culture has the potential to really connect with people, like Sarah was saying, to bring in their emotions, make them feel, make them love something and care. So that's the main reason we recognise the power of the arts and culture in moving us towards the future that we want to see. So I'm going to end with a personal sort of experience of the arts and environment coming together, which will mean that we can hand on to Liv, hopefully seamlessly, although you might want to introduce her. So we organised this annual conference for our members, and last year we decided to invite the hot poets along to our conference, and we put, I don't know if it was an hour or an hour and a half on the programme. And in the morning we did a field visit to a farm, Martin Lyne's farm. He's the farmer that started the nature-friendly farming network, and Liv and some of the other poets went along to that visit. And then the session in the afternoon, I don't know how they had done this, but they had written this incredible poem about the visit that morning and Martin and how amazing he was and the incredible work that had happened. And then we collectively wrote some poetry and you did some performance, and it was amazing. And people came up to me afterwards, I hope you don't mind me saying this, Liv, and said they saw poetry on the agenda and they were like, oh God, poetry. And they said it was one of the best sessions they have ever been to at any of our retreats, because it just connected us with our emotions, and it made us sort of remember why we were doing the work. I mean, I was quite emotional several times during that session, and that's exactly what it was all about. So, passing on to Liv.
I'm not sure I can do a better introduction than that, but I do want to just say that Liv actually co-founded Hot Poets with Chris, who's standing at the back, Chris Redmond, and that it's an award-winning spoken word artists. I think it's very important that we actually, obviously, these artists have been working on We Feed the UK, but I think it's really important that we actually just imagine a world in which spoken word isn't creative and then think, why do we need poets? So let me hand over to Liv.
Oh, do I have to do that? Hello. It's really interesting that you're talking about the future stuff as well, because, and I'll get to that in a second, but Hot Poets started we tried to start before lockdown and failed, and after lockdown we started in 2020, but it began in a muddy field in Glastonbury, and me and Chris were watching a very successful poet with a huge audience do a really depressing dystopian doom poetry about climate change, and they used the immortal words, "I'm dead and every part of me knows it," and the whole audience kind of went, and me and Chris were like, perhaps we should maybe, as artists, possibly try an alternative approach. So it sort of began there, and we had, at the time had an amazing woman called Mikhail Nachmani, who worked in the London School of Economics, and she was in charge of the world database for the most polluting companies. And Chris had met her at a Tung Fu gig, and her job, so she would sort of encourage shareholders to sort of think about how they invested in fossil fuels and whether to actually turn their investments over to renewables. And Chris asked how it was going, and she said, better than we ever thought possible. And it was like, oh, we're not getting that story. We're getting the "we're dead and every part of me knows it" story. We're not getting the other stories. And as artists, we so often come from a place of protest, which is really great and important, and protest is really important. But what about if we came from a different place? What about if we found these people doing this amazing work all over the world, because there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them, and try to highlight their stories and give them attention and help them, empower them up, because there's, they're heroes, amazing people. So we made a collection of 10 poems which we took to COP26, and we had the Met Office and the London School of Economics. And I tell you, I personally believe if you want the arts to be successful, partnership working with those organisations, because you have to instantly get over that prejudice of, oh, poetry's not for me, or poetry's not serious. But if you say poetry with the London School of Economics, people go, oh, maybe it is serious then. So you kind of give yourself credibility in that way. And we had some amazing partners, and we ended up at COP26 where we met the UN, a part of the UN called the Resilience Frontiers, who deal with futures and imagining better futures. And they have 8 pathways. And they like what we did so much, they took us to Botswana Adaptation Week, where we were involved in helping develop and look at these futures with amazing people from all over the world. And we've just finished a project all about futures and imagining them, and getting participants, thousands of people, to write haikus about different futures. I've got some cards here, and I'm going to deliver them to you as tarot cards, so you can get your haiku future in a bit as well. And then I'm here today because we have had the real privilege of working with We Feed the UK on incredible project about regenerative farming. And weirdly, it kind of linked in our project with the UN. One of their pathways to a better future is regenerative farming. That is one of the things they say has to happen. And I went to them quite naively before this project. And after speaking to Martin quite a lot, and I said, I think it's regenerative farming. I think that's the thing that's going to do it. And they were like, yeah, pretty much. That is the most important thing that we can do. So this isn't a side project. This isn't a side quest. Because of the amount of land managed globally by farmers, the power of farmers to actually change biodiversity loss and climate change is colossal. So if we can support farmers in any way by elevating their stories, then we are doing an incredible service for this movement. So it's being a bridge as artists, not standing on the side, but actually getting involved, finding the people doing the work and seeing how we can help. And that is where we found ourselves with Hot Poets. So we're launching 10 poems today with We Feed the UK, each one with an amazing artist. We've got Scotland, Ireland, Wales, we've got all the regions, and they've all been gone live online today as well. And you can see them on the videos, and all the poets, all 10 of the poets are here to perform them, so it's really exciting. But yeah, I genuinely believe that arts can play a role, and it's already happening. People are already doing it everywhere. They're talking about it at COPs. We were in Sharm el-Sheikh and in Dubai, and everyone is talking about the future, revisioning the future. How do we do it? They just got to get over that gap of realising they need to actually bring artists in to help them, and that's what we're trying to do. So, yeah, thank you. And Kate is going to read a poem for you in a minute. Where does Kate come on the schedule? At the end. So I'm just... so you're going to hear one of these poems in action, but you're also going to get your haiku tarot card as well.
I'm really looking forward to your haikus. Don't think you can leave this building without doing that. There'll be a policeman on the way out. No. I think you do actually. I'd like you to share them with us today. Yeah. It's brilliant what you were just saying, Liv, and it's a fantastic example. And there are many more examples of artists working collaboratively with this sector that are telling the new stories. And I think if we kind of think about that, and we think about our future and how we come together at the future, we need to think about farming, as you've said, and actually just getting people on board more broadly with the environmental issues that we're dealing with, which leads me very nicely on to Bonnie, because Bonnie is the Director of Farming for the Future, a collaboration between philanthropy and agroecology to increase the resources flowing to the transformation of UK food and farming systems. So think food. We all think about food, don't we? I do, certainly, a number of times a day. But actually, how do we think about food differently? Bonnie's going to talk to us about that.
So I want to make this just a tiny bit interactive. I would like to know how many people in this room consider themselves in some way a funder? Okay, thank you. How many people in this room, and this is not exclusive Venn diagrams, consider themselves in some way to be some sort of artist in their personal lives, whatever? Lovely. And how many people consider themselves in some way to be some sort of grower? Great. And how many people eat food? Oh, everyone. So the reason I'm doing that, like we were talking about cross-sector stuff, we're talking about creativity, we're talking about collaboration. I'm going to focus on the collaboration bit because these guys have really covered some of the other reasons why we should do creative cross-sector stuff so well already. But I just want to remind us that we are all more than just our jobs. We are also people who are very aware of the current crisis that we're in and want to do something about it. And one of the ways we can do that is through our jobs. And if you are a funder, you are part of the system. And so Farming the Future recognises that funders can play an inside game role. We need to change the philanthropy system from the inside so that it's doing the very best it can do to contribute to the multi-poly crisis that we're in. And so I've come to this personally from being all of those things. I've worked in theatre, I've worked in food activism, and I've worked in funding. And this job is amazing because it allows me to bring together food activism, my passion for doing funding differently, where it shifts power, where it brings people together to tackle complex issues. And it funds the most amazing, inspiring people who are so ambitious beyond their hyperlocal level for systemic change and allows us to make some contribution towards that. So I'd encourage you all to just embrace that possibility and see how much you can nudge your organisations into that, because it's very rewarding. I previously worked for Power to Change that was all about community business stuff and worked in like multi-stakeholder collaborations from hyperlocal to infrastructure to national level. And I thought, that's great, and I'd love to see more funders collaborate on community power and the economy. And I often heard, oh, we're doing our strategy at the moment, so we can't collaborate with anyone else. Or, oh, we've just done our strategy, so we can't collaborate with anyone else. Or we're just doing this pilot, would you like to collaborate with us? Or we can't collaborate with them, they're not third horizon enough. And I was like, come on, guys, there must be some way that we can work together. And so when I saw Farming the Future, I got super excited because what it is a collaboration of philanthropy organisations and the agroecology sector working together to do pooled grant making that shifts power from philanthropic decision makers into the hands of the sector that they're funding. So it operates a pooled fund. It started in 2019. It's quite small in terms of its pooled fund, but we hope to grow it. It's given out 1.6 million so far to about 37 different collaborations involving about 80 different organisations. And they are doing incredible stuff from youth engagement to policy work to on-the-ground food systems, all sorts of amazing stuff. We've got one of our ambassadors in the room, Jyoti. She's much more rousing speaker than me, so I feel a bit intimidated. So Farming the Future was set up to grow and strengthen the movement of people and organisations that are trying to transition us in a just transition to UK agroecology through shifting the flow of resources from philanthropy into the sector. And so I've learned quite a lot about collaboration through doing this. I've only been involved for a year. And I wouldn't want to put anyone off at all, because collaboration is super important, and we cannot actually tackle the issues that are facing us without some sort of collaboration. But I would say people don't really collaborate unless they have to, right? Because it takes more time, it's a bit harder work, and we're not taught any of the skills we need to do it at school. So it's just a bit tougher. So you have to really know why you want to do it and really want to do it quite hard. And the people in our collective really do, and they've stuck with it through thick and thin, and have really supported this because they can see the potential of smashing together philanthropy and the agroecology sector and seeing what happens, seeing if we can really shift stuff together. And we know that no one organisation can fund the entirety of the system. Often when we do our strategy, we see this spiralling system of stuff that we have to tackle, and we don't do enough co-strategizing with others to say, okay, this is our unique bit and this is what we can contribute. And I think we need to do more of that as well. If funding through a pooled fund is not where you're at yet, or funding collaborations isn't where you're at yet, at least talking to other people who are in your sector is a really great way to start working out where you might fit in the picture, because it's a big and complex picture and it does need us all to think a little bit more collaboratively about what we do. So I know I'm running out of time. I don't want to take too much time, but I would say For me, the key thing that has helped our collaboration is really listening and trying as much as we can to bring in different voices into our collaboration and genuinely try and shift who makes the decisions on the funding. So we no longer, like the funders involved in our pooled fund and the staff don't make any of the decisions about where the money goes. It's on the ambassadors, which is quite an ask. They are ambassadors from the agroecology sector, and they represent the entire sector, which is, you know, quite a weight for them to carry. So we have to support them by listening as best we can to everything that we hear. And as funders, we're in a really privileged position to hear about all of the connections and the needs. So we have to do good stuff with that. And I'm going to leave it there because I just want to encourage you all to join us on this journey of power sharing in funding and thinking about where you might fit in that picture. And we'd be really interested to start a pooled fund around communications and creativity if people are up for doing that in agroecology.
I'm just going to say, collaborating is great, and actually it's not as hard as it's hard because you have to manage it, but a lot of that is through listening. Yeah. I mean, we were a very small organisation when I took over Open Eye. There was 4 of us. There's now 15. Last year we did 57 exhibitions. We worked with, I can't remember how many, but it was at least 80-something partners. Everything we do is co-authored. And actually, the value that we're adding, because we work across the Northwest region, we work internationally, we work at a hyper-local level with communities. The things that we're doing now could not have happened if we hadn't decided that our model would just be collaborative. So harder, yeah, in a way, but actually in other ways it's easier, because once those collaborations are up and running, your sense of impact is huge. It's huge. My head is the size of the universe, as you can just tell from what I said. But that comes about because actually we have managed to have a lot of impact. The communities that we've worked with have changed. Their thoughts have changed. So if you can do that, isn't it better in your day job? I think maybe. So I'm going to talk to now, hand over to a collaborator. It's his day job. Yeah. So I'm going to introduce you to Tom Burditt. He's the CEO of the Wildlife Trust for Lancashire, Manchester, North Merseyside. He's founder and project board member of Nature North, which is incredibly important as a new policy unit, looking at how we collaborate together across the north of England. And he's everywhere, as far as I can see. But he's also founder, director of Greater Manchester Environmental Fund. Obviously, he's very keen to set up Greater Liverpool Environmental Fund. But he's going to do it. I can see it in his face. Tom.
Wow, thank you very much. That's quite an intro. I hope I can live up to that. I'm here to start off talking a little bit about Nature North, and then I'm hopefully going to weave it down into a much more locally based story of collaboration that had real impact. So Nature North is a partnership of environmental organisations working across the north of England. Really came together because we were all fed up with competing against each other for funds and thought it was better to team up and basically not just apply for existing funding, but trying to scale up the sorts of money that we were bringing in towards our vision of genuine sort of landscape scale, regional scale nature recovery across the whole of the north of England. So we came together with 2 government agencies in the form of Natural England and the Environment Agency, and really crucially the National Lottery Heritage Fund and also Esme Fairburn Foundation, who are sort of funding it but also sit together on our board. The problem is, though, when you talk about bringing in hundreds of millions of pounds, and this is around blending together philanthropic funding, but public funding, private funding as well, it can all get very, very abstract. So what we've been trying to focus on is particular sort of habitats or particular areas where there might be different solutions to bringing together funding to make the transformational change that we're after. So I'm going to just give a couple of examples of those because I just think it just helps to bring it to life a little bit more. So one of the strands is called Urban Nature North, and this is about trying to deal with the crisis of urban green space that we have in the north of England. So we know, for example, there are 500,000 people in the north of England who do not live within 10 minutes of green space. And this is a kind of fundamental human right. This is a government target. But we also know that green spaces in urban areas are like catastrophically underfunded. And one of the really interesting things about Urban Nature North was it started out by looking at really kind of people's attitudes towards local green space, both what you'd call local communities, but also statutory agencies and councils. And what was really, really fascinating is that when you ask people what they think about their local green space, they go, well, it's all right. And then you talk to them and you say, you know, oh, but you know, your local green space is delivering health and well-being, and it's great for exercise, and there's all this wildlife living there, and it's absorbing particulates from the air, and it's taking in carbon from the sky, and it's cutting out road noise, and it's soaking up all the water. And they go, yeah, I kind of hadn't really thought about it like that, but you know, there's not a dog poop bin there, and I need a toilet when I come. And what Urban Nature North kind of discovered was there was basically a lack of imagination that was coming. And because local residents couldn't visualize a better world for their local green space, they weren't asking for it. And that means that local government then, and national government, doesn't have to fund it because it's not the squeakiest hinge that's in need of oil. But really, really crucially, and I think what's really relevant for why we're all here today, is that when you stop talking to people about biodiversity and you stop talking to them about urban green space and the crisis in funding, and when you ask them about their local park that has a name, that's a place where they visit, they go, oh yeah, you know, I love it there, and actually I've always thought it would be really, you know, amazing if it was bigger or richer. And when you give people space, when you give them headspace, when you give them time, when you allow people to dream and think and have time out from life, their aspirations grow and their demand for better quality of services grows. And I think what's really, really exciting is that through another funded program, this was lottery funded, called Carbon Landscapes. This is how Sarah and our trust came to know each other. This is looking at the carbon landscape, so the peatland landscapes of Chat Moss, which is the area between Manchester and Liverpool, where Stephenson's rocket went across in the early days, and also the old coal mining landscapes of Wigan. And this was very, very collaborative. This was environmentalists working with artists, working with farmers, working with local community groups to imagine a different future and then try and make that future happen. And what's really exciting is that when we brought together visual artists, theatre performers, musicians, poets, the poets were the most effective through the whole program. Claire Shaw, who was our poet in residence. And it was really, really incredible because people were able to just imagine a different future. And we managed to create in both those landscapes incredible legacies. So in Wigan and Lee, we became the first ever national nature reserve on former brownfield land, on industrial land, because the strength of the local community feeling of this is something that they wanted. They wanted their local green space to be better and richer and more full of wildlife and more engaging and more collaborative. And it also changed the government's rules about how national nature reserves were created. So they'd only ever been sort of designated before based on how many percentage of target species they had. And the government changed its priority to say, if a place is that important for its local community, we can change that. And so out of that has then come further funding. We're in a 2-year development phase looking at, again, bringing all these different sorts of finance into looking after that landscape with the local community. And it also stimulated Arts Council England partnership funding with the Down to Earth programme, looking at the importance of the arts and involvement in the arts in basically creating green spaces. And very quickly, because I know we don't have very long, on Chat Moss, on the peatland landscape, the legacy there has been working with what's quite an agricultural community, but working with farmers on different sorts of products that landscape's creating. And we know that the peatlands, when they dry out, so the peatlands of Chat Moss, because they're dry, they emit the same amount of carbon as all the residents of Greater Manchester, which is a hell of a statistic. But if you re-wet them and you make them wetter, they don't do that. So that's a hell of an environmental saving. So we're working with the farming community there on basically alternative crops within that landscape. And some of them are quite abstract. It's selling carbon. You know, if you re-wet the peat, you can actually sell the carbon credits. It's looking at things like sphagnum farming, farming seed heads from bulrushes, reed mace, for the inside of down jackets, and looking at alternative crops, looking at celery, for instance, growing it almost hydroponically in re-wetted peat soils. It's really, really exciting. But at its heart, this whole vision came from the opening up of imagination for the communities living in these areas, and because of the collaboration that the environmentalists and the artists were able to create that vision. And so I just think it's a good example of why we're here.
It's great, and I come from photography, so I'm just going to say that actually,
Together, it's always better together.
just to say, photography, it's the way we share our lives. There's 2 billion images shared online a day. 2 billion. So if you think about how you share your daily life, often people don't write letters. What they do is they share photographs. How can we change the stories that they're sharing? So I just wanted to point to the back, which is one of the projects on a pilot project that we're doing with the Royal Horticultural Society, which is actually going for looking at hard-to-reach communities that aren't necessarily engaged with. It's a pilot. We're going to roll it out, we think. But communities that aren't necessarily engaged with green spaces, and looking at them as the people that actually end up advertising how great it is to be engaged with that green space. They are telling stories, learning how to take photographs that will tell stories, and they're sharing that with their friends, relations, everyone. It's a multiplier effect. So there's a little bit. I do love poetry too. I'm not, but just a little word for photography. I'm just slipping that in there.
I think they both together, and ours was photography and poetry together is really powerful too.
It was photography and poetry together. So there you go. The two together, cross-sector within the arts. I think what everybody said today, is basically how can we not work in silos? How can we collaborate better? You're all working, hopefully, in a collaborative way, and or really looking forward to how you might work more collaboratively going forward. But I'm wondering, before we hand over to the brilliant poet that will close this session, whether I could actually ask the floor if there's any questions that they would like to ask this panel. These guys know what they're doing, so you might not actually get to sit with them again. So does anybody have any questions or points that they'd like to bring out for us all to think about and take away with us? We have a question back there.
Hi, it's just Jane, what you were saying. I'm Liz Carroll from Ennismore. And you hear it a lot about how little percentage philanthropy money goes into the environment. It's good it's going up, but it is still very low. But I just wondered, what is that bigger picture? Because that means 90% of the money goes to other causes, maybe poverty, disadvantage, whatever else that might be. Is it that we should be looking to grow the whole philanthropy part, and therefore how would we attempt to do that? Or are we looking to divert some of the funds, that's in the 90%, across to the environment, given that is sort of so immediate, the need there?
So if anybody didn't hear that, it's very much around actually how do we do it, because there's a limited pot in terms of philanthropy. Is it growing philanthropy, or is it diverting in some way? Can I just, before I hand over to Jane, just say, actually, if we work together all the time, that would be a good start, because then you'd be putting the two pools of arts funding, cultural funding, with the environmental funding.
There's a lot of coming together of disadvantage and the environment. There are a lot of points now where the two come together, but it's still so often quoted that I'm just interested to understand where you see that going.
Yeah, that's a great question. Oh, thank you.
And we certainly don't want to divert. We are actively involved in work to grow the amount of philanthropy in the UK. There's an organisation called the Beacon Collaborative that's been working on that. They're specifically working to raise more funding from the UK's wealthy individuals. And there are different initiatives going on at lots of different levels. So we're also involved in the Big Give, which is a match funding campaign, which I know you know about, Liz, which is aimed at getting more of the public to give more to environmental causes. So growing the overall amount of money that's given is definitely very important. And the other side of it is working with funders at these intersections so they can look at what they do with an environmental lens and look for areas where they can fund, it might be that they're a health funder, that they can fund where there are going to be benefits to the environment and to health, so they're achieving the same outcomes, but building in environment and climate. But yeah, definitely don't seek to divert.
Can I just jump in? So I was just thinking about that, and obviously you don't want to divert it away from things that are necessary, but a lot of the things that charitable giving funds are things that are necessary because we have a broken system. And so charity picks up a lot of that slack, and you can't really make a case for it like being taken away, but I think there is a case for like improving how we fund together so that we're tackling some of those issues. So if you look at environmental funding and then break it down into what goes into farming, it's like an even tinier percentage, right? Very little charitable funding goes into farming. Quite a lot of investment goes into farming, and there's quite a lot of research into how much investment goes into farming. It's not, it's not huge, but if you look across the entire globe and how much money goes into farming from investment and finance, it's a lot into quite damaging types of farming, right? So there are ways that you can like remove money from things that harm and put it into things that are good. And even if you're not going to unfund food banks, think about how we can fund a system where food banks aren't needed. So yeah, that's my take.
We have another question here.
Do I need the mic? Perhaps I can. Really, really lovely talk. Thanks, guys. Young people. So I'm currently grappling with TikTok. I've literally just joined TikTok at the weekend because we want to run a campaign visually for young people. So any thoughts from the panel on that, and also any thoughts from Liv about how we could again get words into those visuals on TikTok, because I think TikTok, from what I've just seen so far, is way more powerful when it's just the images.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really, many of us will have children of the age that are TikTokers, yeah, and I think, I think many people in power aren't the people who are working with TikTok. So I do think it's really important that we understand the impact that those platforms have, actually. I mean, they are largely visual. We do need to support young people to actually utilise them in a way that tell worthwhile stories. And actually, this is where we come, photography and poetry can do that incredibly well. We've got some interesting poets that work with beatbox, for example, within your group, haven't we?
Yes, but sort of returning, I don't personally use TikTok very much, but we have an amazing social media person who does. But I did go on there to see how it went, to find out my daughter had used my profile and was as a 10-year-old and going as me. So that was quite a. But she showed me how to take it all off again, so that was positive. But it's really important to have a presence across all of the social media channels, and each one you have to be represented in a different way. And some of them work really well with spoken word poetry, and some of them work really well with the kind of with visuals. But I'm sure Josie, our social media person, who's much more of an expert than me, would be happy to talk to you about it. That would be amazing. Well, I don't want to like offer her services, but she might give you like a couple of minutes. We work with TikTok all the time. We're just about to do a really big one for young people, and we'd love to work with you. You should have led with that.
It's probably worth a follow-up conversation after we've sort of broken up, but we have a youth council at our wildlife trust, which grew out of one of our sort of nature-based health and well-being programs. And the youth council is, they're between 13 and 25 of age, so it's a really, really good spread. Ours is a bit younger than other kind of similar groups, and we basically, the youth council, they sort of both do a lot of kind of environmental activism and activity themselves, and they actually design the things that they want to be involved in. They also been involved in a lot of our campaigns. They organised a thing where we all went down to Westminster to meet MPs. They went to COP when it was in Glasgow, and they've also done for us so far quite short social media takeovers, but they have done that. So basically being in charge of all our channels, and we're working on kind of media training and things with them. So there's an awful lot that can be done. The immediate thing that sprung to mind, because they were grappling with exactly your challenge, and they were trying to come up with a way to make, there's a campaign going on at the moment about going peat free when you're growing food or growing plants. And one of the things they hit on was that at the time there was a real craze, which actually my daughter was a big follower of as well, for houseplants. And because, they're so beautiful and everyone was like, filling their bedrooms with houseplants and taking photos of them. And actually what they'd kind of really worked out was that rather than peat being the entry point, they used houseplants as the entry point and just had really great images, and then used that as the way in. And I think they even took houseplants actually down onto Chat Moss, onto the peatland landscape, and kind of filmed themselves doing it. So there's just really great creativity. And I think what I really love about whenever we work with the Youth Council is there's so much hope and there's just so much energy, because it's like their future that they're trying to inspire others to help to look after. So I think social media is a really tangible example of where youth engagement can work. But we found it from everything from political activism through to actually just restoring things on the ground, just how fundamental it's been.
And I would always say, make it part of the art. Make the whole social media part of the creative thing that you're offering. So it isn't just like a marketing thing, but it actually becomes a really creative and exciting thing. And with our Haiku Futures, we did that through social media. So we got people to send us haikus and photos, and both of them together. And we would receive 500 of each a week about the future. And then we would match different haikus with different people's photos, and we would weave them into sort of 3-minute films, which had sort of 25 of each. And these are the kind of little slides, and you'd have beautiful photos and haikus, and people would watch them because they were in them. So you have 50 people championing that piece of work, and they would share it, and it became, you're using social media in a creative way. So yes, make it part of the art would be my advice.
I think we're sort of coming quite close to the end. So if we could, we've got 2 more hands. I'm sure there are lots of. Could we just take? If we just took one more, we'll take the 2 questions. If we take them, could we take them together and see if they chime?
Toby Smith, Belfast Photo Festival and formerly Climate Visuals. So I am biased to photography as a warm up to that. Something that's on my desk, it's been a perennial thing I've tried to express, is considering the impact and the effect of visual media, arts and photography when needing to translate it into a theory of change or its value to collaborators or funders that are not already with us on that value of the arts and culture or generally journey. And I wondered if any of you have any tips from a Babel fish or other experiences you've had.
Can I just say, so we have the lead for socially engaged photography, and I think what that means is the expertise of people in the community and their lives come together with the expertise of a photographer, and working collaboratively over a period of time, the voice of those people co-design the thing that comes out and goes out into the world. I would just say that that's incredibly powerful, actually for TikTok too, because whose voice are we actually listening to? Photographers have an amazing way of making stories happen. If they come together with the people who are inherently connected to those stories, that voice can really be a very, very powerful one. And people listen because you're not saying this is all about photography. And actually you shouldn't be saying this is all about photography. It's all about people. Communities and people, that's who we want to work with, and we want them to shape it with us. I think it's time to actually listen to a bit of creativity. I'm going to introduce Kate. Kate Fox, who's been working in Northumberland with Stuart Johnson, and the theme of the work that they've been doing together is around soil. Kate, could I ask you to come up and inspire us all?
Pass it under. I've been anticipating where that cable will go throughout
about the whole thing. Thank you. Good. Okay. Hello, everyone. I kind of feel more pressure than usual doing a poem because it's a bit like, yes, okay, so poetry can inspire the youth and save the world and make more plants grow and is better than, but not better than, photography and other arts. It's a lot. I will say I'm really glad that the photographer who has been also documenting and working at the farm in Hewson, where I was lucky enough to spend an amazing afternoon on a quad bike, is here, Johanna. And actually, I just felt we weren't officially collaborating, but her perspective and view on how soil, which is my poem I'm about to do now, how soil contains constellations. And it gave me a whole new perspective just in that moment, that shift. And I think those little perspective shifts that suddenly happen and that have also happened to me in the course of this project, it's so brilliant to be one of the hot poets, because I'm definitely someone who generally finds only climate change poems to be more depressing than climate change. And honestly, there's been a revelation, truly, because we're working with the energy of hope as far as possible. And so I am aware of the chair moving urgency. So before that happens, and the world burns, so I'm not going to do that. Before that happens, just to quickly say, so Stu, the farmer, basically, his reasons for becoming a regenerative farmer were really, initially, financial. He wanted to save money, and he has found that is happening. But along the way, he has become an impassioned soil geek. And when I learned I was going to write a poem about soil, having never thought about soil before, well, it turns out I've become a soil geek too. So I feel like, again, the process of transformation, the shift in perspective, I feel like I'm proof it works, because I'm sort of an ordinary audience member too. So, but now I'm soil, because this is called The Soil Speaks, hence the mushroom boiler suit. I'm like, soil? Okay. People treat me like I'm dirt, like I'm something they've trodden at the bottom of their shoe. But I'm literally, in the food you eat, I'm part of you. People don't want to look down, but the world is at your feet. Did you know there's more microorganisms in 1 teaspoon of soil than there are people on the planet? But scientists know more about space than they do soil, though I'm the liquid gold, not oil. After the Second World War, bomb factories switched to nitrogen fertiliser production. After years of scarcity and uncertainty, everything was new. Everything just grew. What could possibly go wrong? Well, I became an addict. The more you fed me, the thirstier I got. No one bothered what was beneath, all fur coat and no knickers, malnourished underneath, in eternal need of more and more and more artificial feed. Farmers used to know that as above, so below. Where there's muck, there's brass. But then the earth could be sterile and things would still grow. We had maths and chemistry. Who needs nature and biology? Kill the bad stuff, crack on. Agriculture became a battle to be won. But everything changed for Stu once he realised he needed to escape fluctuating fertiliser prices. Future-proof against global crisis, the cost of everything going up by the tonne. He'd thought generations back flat cappers were silly old sods obsessed with soil roots. But turns out they knew we're not done with dung. Like politicians, I thrive when I'm full of manure, which brings microbes to exchange sugar with plants feeds fungi, is turned over by dung beetles. We're the farmer's army. We're all on the same team. And he's learning he can do less. Stop ploughing, stop disturbing this cycle of good stuff, which starts with grazing. Good crap out, great food back in. And he's become more a steward, a guiding force, not a boss. And it's led to gains, not loss. Curlews are back, he says. Not that I'm bothered about curlews. Grey partridges have returned, he says. I'm not happy because I love grey partridges. And I want to say, it's all right, lad. We know you've not turned hippie. These are the signs. That was his greatest fear. Stu does not want anyone to think he secretly loves the earth, but he does. Sorry. Where was I? Okay, yes. These are the signs he'd sped up too much to read of how much we gain when we have proper feed. I feel springier. You're walking on air, a cycle of resilience, self-sufficiency, true self-care. No longer humiliated by my humour slack, I'll humour you and give some back. Did you know the word human comes from the word humus, which means earth? We need more humility, but I know my worth. Powerful nutrients are in your food when I'm deep fed. Humans are more alive when the soil isn't half dead. Traditional wisdom and modern tech working together, collaborating with mutual respect in a cycle of perpetual rebirth. So don't we all need to come on back down to earth? Thank you.
She didn't let us down, did she? Thank you so much. Please do stay and have a chat with the other people in the room, except for those at the back who would please get off the chairs so that we can move them next door. Everybody else, please do stay. There's some of the farmers and some of the poets and some of the photographers are going to have a chat with us now in a few minutes, 10 minutes, I think. Whilst we just to rearrange the chairs, please do talk to each other. This is about collaboration, so have a chat to your neighbour if you don't know them. Thank you very much. Thank you, panel. They have been brilliant.